Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Edward James. I'm the Director of Content and Analysis at MEED Projects. And over the next 15 minutes or so, I'll be giving a brief rundown of the MENA PPP projects market, taking a look at some of the trends that's happening in the market at the moment, as well as examining some of the key project opportunities that are coming up. So just to provide some context, this presentation and the data in it is sourced from MEED Projects. MEED Projects is an online projects tracking service covering all major projects in the MENA and now Africa region. Currently, there are over 15,000 active projects in the region worth more than $7 trillion. And it's from these projects that we're able to quantify some of the trends and opportunities in the market. If you want to find out more about MEED Projects, then please just go onto the link there, meedprojects.com. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the numbers around PPP projects in the MENA region. So as we can see from the left-hand side graph here, the number of PPP projects in the region has been steadily increasing over the last decade. The PPP model has been becoming more popular each year, and you see that last year in 2019 was the best year yet in terms of the number of PPP projects in the region at exactly 50 projects last year. So as you can see, there is certainly a trend in the region for the PPP model being adopted. It is becoming more popular, and more clients and countries are adopting it as a way forward to develop their projects. Now we can also see on the right-hand side that the overall value of MENA projects in the region in dollar terms has also been on the rise over the last decade. In 2019, there were close to $12 billion worth of PPP projects awarded. In the year before, it was just over $11 billion. And in 2017, it was a little over $8 billion. So you can see in the last 3 years, as the number of projects has increased, so too has the value of deals. Okay, so now let's take a look at that same data, but let's split it by country. And in this way, we can see in the last 5 years how many PPP projects and values have been awarded in each of the top countries in the region. And you can see that Egypt and UAE are the two leading markets in terms of PPP projects. The UAE in the last half decade has awarded more than $10 billion worth of PPP deals, mainly in the power and water space. It's followed by Egypt. Again, a lot of that is in renewable energy and power, a little over $10 billion. And then we've got Saudi Arabia, $6 billion, Oman as well, around $6 billion. Morocco, again, primarily in the solar renewable space, nearly $5 billion. Qatar, and then Bahrain, Iraq, Jordan, and Kuwait. So you can see that the market is fairly different in each country. Some countries have been driving forward with PPP projects a little harder and a little faster than others. Okay, now let's look at that data by year, and you can see that while each country has awarded a significant number of PPP projects, on a yearly basis, these can differ quite significantly. For example, the UAE and Egypt, the two largest markets. However, the UAE has had peaks and troughs in the last 5-6 years in terms of value of projects awarded. Obviously, you've got a large number of very big projects. And so depending on the year that they are awarded, you are going to see spikes in the value of work awarded. On the other hand, Egypt in the last 3 years has been quite consistent and stable, with about 3 PPP projects awarded each year. You can see in Saudi Arabia, last year was its best year yet at close to $2.5 billion. Whereas in Qatar, for example, we've had few PPP projects in the last 4 years, but in 2015 was an excellent year at more than $3 billion. So we do have some slight inconsistency in a few countries in terms of the value of deals awarded each year for PPP projects. But nonetheless, we've seen more than $50 billion worth of PPPs awarded in the last decade or so. Now, again, let's take that same data for the last decade and look at the sector type and split for PPP projects in the MENA region. And you can see, perhaps unsurprisingly, that the two largest sectors are utilities, power and water, and that power is by far and away the single largest sector for PPP projects. As I said, it's no real surprise. Power and indeed water projects have long been developed now for more than 20 years in the MENA region. They're the accepted model for large-scale utility projects. Most of them are backed by government guarantee and guaranteed offtake, and therefore come with little risk for the investors, and therefore are an attractive option for both government and private sector alike. For the private sector, they supply long-term revenues at low risk, only really the construction and operational risk there. For the finances, there's a lot of references and templates, government's guarantees, offtake guarantees. So for everyone, they offer a very stable and attractive model for development of power and water. And that's not really going to change. Today, it's rare to see, in the GCC in particular, big power and water projects awarded on a straightforward lump sum EPC basis. Nearly all of them are now on a PPP, using the PPP model. And indeed, we're seeing now a trend towards privatization of existing assets and selling off existing assets to the private sector. So we're still a bit further behind in terms of other sectors, transport, such as railways, airports, and so forth, construction, hospitals, oil and gas, still lagging somewhat in terms of adoption of PPP, but that is changing, as we'll see in a minute. And again, on the right-hand side, we'll see that the number of projects is consistent with the breakdown of sectors. We've had 138 or so major power projects awarded in the last decade, some 75 water projects, 39 construction deals, industrial 17, transport 14, and so on. So it's still very much a utilities play, as we discussed. Now let's take a look at behind these numbers and to actually put some projects behind them. This list here just gives you an idea of some of the major projects developed on a PPP basis currently under construction in the MENA region. As you can see, a lot of them are dominated by power and water projects, as you might expect. But we're hoping that that will change over time, as we are seeing, as we'll explore later in this presentation, some new sectors, some new types of projects coming up in other sectors. But as you can see here, with the exception of perhaps the LRT project in Cairo, recently awarded, the largest projects in the region under execution tend to be, in the PPP space, tend to be in the power and water side, for reasons that we've discussed. So what are the major drivers for the PPP market in the region? Well, ironically, I suppose, COVID-19 has encouraged and accelerated the adoption of PPP model. Government revenues have fallen in line with the oil price, and as government budgets are become more constrained, there is an increasing need to explore different avenues for developing projects. And the PPP route, using the private sector to finance and operate projects, of course, it becomes certainly more attractive in this current environment. We've also, over the years, seen improved and enhanced regulatory and legal frameworks. New laws have come in for PPP projects, whereas previously maybe they were done on a contractual basis. Now we are seeing greater regulatory oversight and enhanced laws for the development and nurturing of PPP type projects. We're also starting to see, for the first time really, successful projects being developed and awarded outside of the utilities project. There's been a couple of schools programs awarded for the first time on a PPP basis in the region. We're also seeing some road projects coming up as well. So we are gradually moving out of the utility sector, and that's obviously going to be a big fillip for development of PPPs in the region. At the same time, as more PPP projects are delivered and executed, we're seeing great experience from both private sector and governments. There's a better understanding of the model, better understanding of the risks and the challenges involved and what needs to be done, and that's certainly helping projects move along. At the same time, we're also seeing governments becoming increasingly accepting of more equitable share of risk. Previously, one criticism could have been made that projects' risk was far too much on the side of the developer and contractors, and now the government's understanding that they also need to take some of the risk on board as well, and that helps obviously with the development of the projects. Likewise, exceptionally low financing costs at the moment, as well as increasing reference, mean that the finance institutions are more willing to lend and at lower cost, which makes PPP even more attractive. And we're also seeing as well now better demand data. So one of the key issues around risk and the development of PPP projects outside of the guaranteed offtakes in the utility sector was an unknown demand, whether it was for airports or roads or schools, hospitals. We're now seeing improving demand data, which allows investors to be able to properly finance risk, allocate risk, and understand their projects better, and therefore move ahead with them into execution. There are still, of course, challenges, which you can see on the right-hand side. While there is improved data, it sometimes can be still a little inadequate for projects outside the utility sector. Still more work needs to be done around demand data, as well as ensuring that demand is going to be consistent through the lifetime of the PPP projects. We've seen in recent months and years changes in laws and regulations to the PPP regulatory frameworks and bodies, which of course creates some uncertainty. That doesn't necessarily help with the development of PPP projects. We're still in the process of refining and improving the regulatory frameworks and laws around PPP development. This is something that's an ongoing process until we reach the optimum way forward. We're still, of course, there's still sometimes an issue around risk not always being fairly distributed, particularly outside of the utility sector. This is always going to be a hurdle for the private sector to overcome. And likewise, in some countries, some markets, and some projects, expectations from the client side can sometimes be unrealistic in terms of what the private sector can take on and deliver. And of course, until there is a strong list of references and templates for the development of projects outside of utilities, then of course it's always going to be a challenge to get new projects in new sectors on a PPP basis off the ground. So looking forward, there are more than $200 billion worth of PPP projects planned in the region. This graph gives you an idea of where they are spread and where they're located. You can see Saudi Arabia and Kuwait lead the way, more than $40 billion of known PPP projects in the pipeline. In Saudi Arabia's case, a lot of that is in the renewable energy program, but if you go to the NCP website, you can see there's a large number of new PPP projects across different sectors in the pipeline. Likewise in Kuwait, which has been a bit of a slow mover so far on PPP for various reasons, the CAP there, Kuwait Authority of Public-Private Partnerships, has a large number of projects in the pipeline, which we hope will come to fruition over the next half decade or so. We then have UAE and Iraq at more than $25 billion each, Bahrain at nearly $20 billion, and a number of PPP projects across other markets as well. And of course, this list is, and this data is for known PPP projects. Clearly, if you take on board projects not yet conceptualized, this number will grow significantly. So it's a very large pipeline of projects. On this slide, you can see some of the big projects in the pipeline. Many of them will be known to you. And as you can see, unlike the previous similar slide on exit projects under execution, you can see here we have a lot of projects now being developed outside of utilities. We've got railways, the Land Bridge, the metro project in Kuwait, the Bahrain airport. We've got the Red Sea Dead Sea Water Conveyance project in Jordan. We've got the Basra to Aqaba pipeline in Iraq and Feeder port in Tunisia. And you can see there are, we're moving away from just PPP being employed in utilities. We are looking increasingly at other sectors also being used for the framework. So that's very exciting and a very interesting dynamic that's going to happen over the next 5 years or so. And finally, just to finish off my presentation, I just want to give you an illustration of some of the projects that are coming up, some of the more novel projects which people are looking at the moment, which are live in the market. One of the most interesting ones is the Salalah Fumrate Truck Road in Oman, which will be one of the first toll roads to be developed on a PPP basis in the region. Currently, RFQ is out for the transaction advisory project, and we should hopefully see RFP for the actual concession come out over the next 18 months or so. So this is a very interesting project, 80-kilometer long road through the mountains, and we'll be looking at this project in very close detail in the years to come. Likewise, another project which has a huge amount of interest is the King Hamad Causeway between Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. More than 80 investors have attended a meeting on this to understand more about the project last year. This is an extremely attractive project for them because, in part, the demand for transport links between Bahrain and Saudi Arabia is somewhat known already due to the existing King Fahd Causeway. And this is a project that is going to attract a lot of interest, and we hope that we can start seeing some movement on this next year, now that the advisory contracts have been signed. Another new novel project is in the healthcare space. This is for the Al Ansar Hospital development in Saudi Arabia. EOIs were submitted just a couple of weeks ago to the National Centre for Privatisation of PPP. 87 developers, operators and architects, contractors submitted expressions of interest early in this year. And if this goes ahead, this will be one of the first hospital projects to be developed on a PPP basis in the region, and we'll provide a template for other projects in the years to come. As I mentioned earlier, we've already seen a successful implementation of schools PPP for the first time in the region, both in Qatar and Saudi Arabia. A couple of big awards just in the last couple of months for the first phases of these. In Qatar, Bawa and Al Jabba won the first concession agreement for 8 primary and secondary schools to build and operate and maintain the schools. And likewise in Medina, 60 schools have been awarded to Ajiyad, part of Vision Invest and Aquapower, and the contractor Al Barani for these 60 schools and to serve 50,000 students. So it now looks like with these 2 contracts for schools, that the schools are now firmly established as part of their PPP model, which is of course very exciting. We expect to see many more schools as part of these programs to be developed over the next few years. And then finally, over in Jordan, we've got the IFC assisting the Ministry of Public Works and Housing there with the King Hussein Bridge Crossing Terminal. This is for the design, build, finance, and operation of a new terminal and ancillary facilities at the King Hussein Bridge, otherwise known as the Alami Bridge, on the border between Israel and Jordan. And expressions of interest have been submitted for that. So again, another new type of project previously unseen in the PPP, using the PPP model in the region. So I hope that's given you an idea of some of the major developments in the PPP sector in the region, some of the new projects coming up and the pipeline, and given a lot of food for thought. If you do have any questions or wish to discuss this further with me, my details, my email address can be found below. As for now, thank you very much for your attention in that. I do hope you found it interesting.